Redditors of HR, what are the biggest office scandals or dramas you've experienced? We had a team building day, and the CEO made it so his team won. The three married people, not to each other, had sex in the hot tub. There was also the vice president that was having an affair with his secretary. So he beat his wife and she passed and threw the evidence in the company trash. Or you could go with the guy that was trying to bankrupt a division of the company so his equity company could buy it. When caught, he threatened to hit everyone. Story 2. Security footage showed my manager rummaging through a computer he had no reason to be on. It checked out the computer, and they found he deleted some security footage, so they recovered it. He was fired for having sex with one of the employees at work. She was fired too. Story 3. My mother was in HR for about 35 years. She has some wild ones, including the guy who ended his life and set up a scavenger hunt of died notes. He'd had an affair with someone at the company, and it blew up in his face. End his life over it, blamed the other woman for it, and literally left scavenger hunt-style notes around the office, with prizes at each stage, including revenge adult film, and her lingerie, the guy who didn't turn up to work for 2 or 3 days. When it was finally flagged for HR, they went over to his house, convinced a family member to unlock it for them, and found him face down on the floor of his bedroom, having had a stroke. The dude survived. Aircon engineer got blown up while doing some work. His workmate was on the roof and put the wrong rod in the wrong hole, caused an explosion. Fortunately, an employee found him while he was literally on fire in the corridor, and dragged him to some showers, saved his life. Plumbers working on sewage pipes, bathrooms on the one floor are closed with signs, barriers, and tape. Someone physically removed the tape and barriers, took a crap, and flushed. The plumber was literally covered. They never caught the dude. Creeps set up spy cams in the women's locker room, caught him because he was on his own video, placing the camera in its hiding spot after they found the cameras, and footage was reviewed. Story 4. Not me, but my mom. Someone got fired and they smeared their crap all over the bathroom on the way out. From then on, people had to be escorted out by security. Story 5. We had the cops turn up one morning and arrest one of the fellows for CP on his company computer. He'd been a little careless, apparently, about people walking by his cube. Story 6. 2. New HR lady. Very pretty. Looks like a shorter and slightly less stacked Jessica Rabbit. All the boys in sales are interested, and there is some macho bullcrap generally brewing between them, which is highly unusual for our workplace. None of them have actually asked her the duck out yet, because if they did that and she said no, they'd be out of the running. So it's just a lot of 20-something-year-old guys being bullshy in a way that is sort of deniable. One Friday, their normal pub was full, so they go looking slightly further afield for their normal Friday lunch pint. This is normal in our industry. And end up in a pub the other side of town, where they spot Jessica Rabbit HR lady in a romantic entanglement with the lady from the front desk. And thus were many egos swiftly deflated. Story 7. The receptionist and the land administrator had an affair, and she got pregnant. Her husband had had a vasectomy years earlier. The office affair ended, and the receptionist and her husband maintained that it was a miracle from God. It's a small town, and everyone knew about the affair. It was a big scandal. The receptionist and the land administrator were both kicked out of the church they belonged to. Publicly, the receptionist and her husband pretended nothing had happened, and that this was a wonderful surprise. But everyone knew it was not likely to be the husband's child. Story 8. One shift lead having an affair with his wife with another shift lead girl at work. They both opened the store in the morning, and before any customers arrived, they would bang on the prep table. What the heck? One day when I had to check the cameras for something, I was watching it on fast forward starting from that morning, and was shocked to see them doing it. I watched it for a bit before spilling the beans to my manager. Story 9. A journalist called and asked why we hire pedo. That we then learned that an employee in his late 50s, who had been at the company longer than anyone else, and who had been hired before the company started doing background checks, was a convicted CP. It caused a bunch of drama behind the scenes, and he ended up being fired. Story 10. An outbreak of herpes at a branch office. Most of the staff at this office were engaged in a web of affairs. I fired the HR rep for this branch office because she was involved in the affairs. I also fired 2 who were on probation for other poor job performance, and the rest resigned. The handful of staff members who were not involved in the affairs were transferred while the branch office was closed. Story 11. My female boss was ducking her male boss in the parking garage. Working late and her cell phone off, my boss's husband came looking for her and found them in her car. Fight ensued. Got the story from the garage security guy. My boss and her boss both had black eyes the next day at work. I didn't get to see what the husband looked like. Both bosses continued their jobs like it never happened. Story 12. Recruiter. Found out a potential candidate was fired from his previous job because he threw his boss into a dumpster. Dude was 6 feet 5 inches, so yes. Picked his boss up over his head and threw him until the dumpster. Had to admit, I'm envious. Story 13. There was the VP that promoted every woman that slept with him to vice president. Worked out great, except for the last one. Someone walked into her office, Her skirt was up, her legs wrapped around him, his pants were down. Even though it was well known by all the low-level folks what was going on, management couldn't ignore that one, and they were both fired. The favorite, though, was the super hot young woman that brought a young woman friend to one of his parties. She was promoted post-haste, but was never invited to meetings and had zero contribution. She lasted 6 months and left to go help her brother with selling Xmas tree stands. This was a billion-dollar company. There's also the young woman that mistakenly got the wrong benefits package when she was hired. HR told her to keep it a secret. She didn't. She stayed something like 18 months until she had her $5 million and promptly left. This was all in telecom in the USA. Story 14. When being a student, I worked at a shop that had a section with food. One day I worked at the part where you get salami, bacon, and other things of that kind, open freshly sliced for you. We had a very expensive salami. The boss in charge of our city of that shop, Leitung der Filiale, wanted to try it, liked it, and said to the girl working with me, "Well, it is expensive, but I guess I have 200 grams. The girl, not really the brightest, looked at her and said, "I can make it a bit cheaper for you," meaning by giving a smaller price into the machine when weighing it. I just stood there, looking at her and then at the boss. Boss looked at me, back to the girl, and very calmly said, "No, thank you." About an hour later, I was called into the office of my direct boss. Big Boss was sitting there with him. My boss looked at me. "Just what had happened? Tell me," I told him. He looked at me in a kind of pain. Did that happen for the first time? By now I knew I could not go with anything else but the truth. "I am sorry. No, it did happen before." He heavily sighed. "Do all of you do that?" With his hands, he showed the complete fresh food area. We were 3 at this section, 2 at the chase station, 5 at the meat station, and 2 at the fish section. "I can only speak for the sections I had worked for, sir. I have not been witness to anyone else doing it, and I do not do it as well. The only thing we do, and I was told that this was okay. We give the heads of fish out for free if asked for it." Big Boss got white. "The head of fish? Who wants this?" I explained to her that some PPL take it and cook fish soup from it. Thought she has to throw up in a minute, but she got around. "Okay, I see no problem with that," she said, trying to smile. Then at my boss, "So what are we gonna do with the other girl? She is in a building, therefore protected." Me, still standing there and having an idea answering for my boss. "Why not put her in the suite section? There is everything packed, and she just needs to put it in the register." Then, recognizing what I did, going white, holding my hands over my mouth, mumbling, "Sorry," Big Boss looked at me. "This is a very good idea." Looking at my boss, "You told me that she was direct and honest. You obviously were right." My boss smiled. I have never before seen him smile. I was then asked to be absolute discreet about what we talked and sent back to work. Round comes Monday. Other girl works now at the suite section. I see some new customers, whom I have a somewhat off feeling. Was right. They were detectives to have an eye on the different sections, looking for irregularities. Fast forward 6 weeks later. Girl is not working. I know that she has no vacation, so I have the feeling she has ducked up. My boss calls me in the office, sits me down. "You really thought she could not duck up in suites, did you?" I nodded. "Well, me too." She unpacked pralines and offered them to customers and helped herself to some of it too, like to some whole packages throughout her shifts. She also switched price tags for some customers. I looked at my boss in absolute disbelief. "You're kidding, right?" Nope, he was not. This girl gained a sizable weight through the 6 weeks. She was not pregnant, and she did not understand why it was wrong what she did. It was no way to hold her in the food area. She then was sent to the area where you could buy furniture. Some weeks later, I heard she left the company. Better, she had to leave. Story 15. I've found out I have worked with not one but 2 pedo. One got done for making his own CP, the other for trying to meet up with girls. The worst thing was no one was particularly surprised that these people were. Story 16. Oh, I am friends with an HR attorney for a large agency. So many stories, but possibly my favorites, is one where they walked in and fired one woman for dereliction of duty soon as she showed up for her shift. Like she was horrible at her job and barely performed. She was probational and it was clearly not working out. She and her boss leave for lunch, and when they return, they discover employee is back on campus and working like nothing happened, even greeted them in the gates. They are shocked and ask why she's there when she's been terminated. Employee answered that, "I'm working, you can't just fire me. This is my job," and proceeds to turn around, ignore them, and keep working. They again repeat, "She's been terminated. She needs to go." She says, "I reject that. I don't accept your termination." She literally had to almost be dragged out. It was quite entertaining. Story 17. I worked at a software startup early in my career, and our software needed some direction, so a software architect was hired. He was a bit strange, but that's not unusual for developers nor software architects. He was there some months, missed a lot of days, claimed he was working from home, etc. Finally, he either quit or was let go. I don't remember which. A few months after that, another dev asked if we'd heard about what happened to him. No one had. So he explained that this guy had been chatting up what he thought was a girl in some chat channel and had arranged to meet her for sex. Yep, it wasn't a girl, but a police sting operation. When he showed up, he was arrested for solicitation of sex. I believe he was sentenced to 7 or 8 years in prison. Story 18. Not HR myself, but at organizations I have been with, HR itself has always been the dumpster fire drama group. Here is my best one. This was 2016. I'm a quality manager and hired by a little capital equity group to go in and try to help out struggling businesses that they buy. Great job. I'm working with a pump company, big manufacturing group that makes pumps for city water supplier, chlorine mixers, big machines to add chemicals and filter sewer lines, public pools, big stuff. On paper, the company should have been profitable, but they were losing crazy amounts of money. Sales were strong, margins high, but they couldn't make ends meet. We go in and start digging. We uncovered a lot of crap, borderline fraud, and just incompetence. One thing we found were the HR manager and the engineering manager were going to trade shows, conferences, and trainings together every 3 weeks or so. We thought it was weird to take an HR lady to a trade show or a conference on pump design. We did some digging and found expense reports and airline receipts that didn't match up, and hotels near conferences that were canceled or didn't exist. Basically, they were taking romantic getaways to have an affair and writing up close to $175,000 on company expense reports by claiming bogus business trips. Things like a romantic week in Maui, a 4-day weekend at the Waldorf Astoria in NYC, skiing in Vermont, Cancun, so many trips to Miami we couldn't even keep them straight. Cottage in Park City, UT, Dude Ranch in NM, it was insane. All with fake conferences nearby or conferences that they paid for but never even showed up and signed in. And this is the messed up part. As soon as it all came out, HR fired the engineering manager and was like, underscore, oh yeah, that was all his idea, underscore. And we kept the HR manager on for another year or so. And this lady is now an HR director for a major aerospace manufacturing company. Story 19. 2 concurrent office dramas that resulted in a mass firing. First, my boss, late 30s, an ex-middle school teacher, hired and then ducked a girl he used to teach. This is after he showed up to work a month before with a black eye. A gift from the baby daddy of the other employee he was sleeping with. He was fired, divorced, and estranged from his own teenage children. Meanwhile, his office enemy, another department director, was fired for paying her own employee to be her child's surrogate. Story 20. My old job, I used to be a shift lead at a store before getting promoted to the corporate office. I was really good friends with a girl who worked there, thick as thieves with her and some of the other guys at the store. I made it a point to the store manager to have her be my replacement. A year later, I heard she had moved in with the store manager and his wife, and she had been working as a shift lead for both his store as well as his wife. She seemed to be doing great, and I was sure would get promoted. After almost 2 years, I had went to the store I used to work at and can't recognize anyone there. I had asked a guy there if my friend was still the shift lead or if my old manager was still the manager. But he didn't recognize either name. The new store manager came out, and I had asked him the same question. Oh, dude, they got fired, he said. Wait, really? Can I ask why? Yeah, your boss was having an affair with your friend. She ended up becoming assistant manager before they were figured out. They both got fired, and your friend went east to live with family. I was floored. I knew my friend found the manager attractive, but I never thought she'd hook up with a married man, let alone my old boss. Story 21. Normal scandal. The owner left his wife for his secretary, but the wife owned 50% of the company, and she made him pay through the nose for it. He was a total stereotype. The company had become really prosperous. He started working out, got a really expensive sports car, Lamborghini, I think. Then he dumped his wife, was publicly involved with secretary, left his company to be run by other people and ran off to California, married, and had kids. He was kind of a crap head before that anyway. Story 22. Not HR, our branch had roughly 50 employees. Friday afternoon nibbles used to be a thing, but would need someone to make an effort sorting. One time the plates were sorted and dished out to the various departments. Employee A, after finishing all the cheesels on their plate, decided to go for the front office's plate. The staff who sorted the plates that day, employee B, causally told her that plate is for front office. Employee A flips and throws the cheesel box at employee A and walks off. Employee A and B goes to their respective head of department to complain, which in turn, both head of departments goes to the branch manager to complain about each other's staff. Then the branch-wide email comes through from an annoyed manager saying, if you're going to act like children, then I'll handle this. There will be no more cheesels in this department. Ever. I personally don't like cheesels, but like other employees, didn't appreciate being punished for the actions of A and B. One doctor later on, when resigning, took the opportunity to have a dig by buying boxes and boxes of cheesels on his last day and stack it like a mountain on his reporting table. He also posted multiple posters around the branch with the quote, "Keep calm and eat cheesels." The incident was since referred as Cheeselgate. and we love telling new staff about it. Story 23, sale team. 2 seniors. One logged a HR complaint that the other was harassing her, showing some unprofessional attention. Fast forward a year and they are expecting. Turns out they were just having a fight and she was an idiot. Story 24. We had to fire a union worker. She was on this weird feminism power trip. She wanted to see more women in the positions that were generally male-dominated. And honestly, that's fine. But how she went about was a lawsuit in the making. Actively sabotaging men in a bid to get them fired, then throwing temper tantrums when caught, forcing untrained women into positions that they weren't certified in, and then, if you were a woman and spoke out against being forced into a position that you weren't trained in and wanted to get into a safer role into, you had the training, she would turn against you and try to have you fired. This was at a plant with horribly toxic metals, molten metal around 1400 degrees. Like, if we have an accidental release, every house in a 3-block radius would need to be evacuated type of danger. Then there was this other chick. Came here with that same feminist stuff, but in her case, it presented itself in her wardrobe. She was in constant violation of the dress code. Our dress code is there so we don't get them chemicals, molten metal and whatever on us. And her git was walking around in thigh-high boots and tiny mini-skirts. Every time someone would say something, she would act like it's crap. Eventually, one of our visiting customers took issue with how she was dressed and complained. This chick tried to pull the sexism card again until she learned that the customer in question was a woman. Then it became out how this customer was setting the feminist movement back in crap. This employee ended up on this crap list for a lot of the higher-ups because of this. So when the bathroom incident happened, everyone knew she was gone. Everyone but her, apparently. So, yeah. She went to use a men's bathroom over a women's just because she felt like it. While she was in there, a man came in to take a piss. She lost her mind and tried to act like she was in danger and demanded he should be fired. For the guy's part, he didn't even know she was there. Just came in, went straight to the urinal, then walked out. She had been watching him through the fabled stall gap. When she was asked why she didn't go to any of the other women's bathrooms on this floor, there's 5 women's bathrooms to 3 men's, she wasn't able to answer the question. Well, after her termination, she came back with a lawsuit, claiming she was fired. She lost, and the company cracked down harder on dress code violations and making sure people understood which bathrooms they were supposed to be using. Story 25. Here's a couple weird things I experienced. Worked in accounting at a bacon plant. The floor directly above our office spaces was a locker room for the floor workers. I had only been working there a few days when we heard a loud bang, a pause, and then a lot of screaming and yelling. A guy hit himself in the locker room because his supervisor wouldn't leave her husband for him. I left that job a few years later because my direct report, that lived a couple blocks away from me, had a psychotic break and left a voicemail telling me she had a gun and was going to hit me because she should have been promoted instead of the company hiring me. She was institutionalized for 6 months. I quit when the company let her come back and I was forced to work with her. She then reported to my boss instead of me. I heard later that they promoted her to my position when I left, also at that place. The factory didn't have an on-site IT department. I was young and familiar with computers, so I was voluntold to manually install a patch to all the PCS for the Alluviu virus. There was one office that was always locked because he was the only person who worked third shift. I believe he worked with overseas salespeople and didn't actually have anything to do with our local operations. My boss got the key to his office and let me in. There were dozens of framed pictures of this guy's wife. Wedding pics, glamour shots, and nudes. Yes, even the nudes were in frames. He was fired. Story 26. My very first investigation ever came from an employee complaint that stated that a lower-level management employee, who was married, was on her knees giving a BJ to a non-management employee, an on-work property, and that the manager knew about it but was covering it up for some reason. So some backstory, the manager of the building was not from around the building, lived about 3 hours away. He was reassigned to this location because of a previous HR investigation before I was in HR, so I don't know what this investigation was about, and was close to retirement. So rather than firing him then, they relocated him to this small building to finish his last few months before retiring. The purpose of saying that is he lived in a hotel 500 feet from the building and went to go eat lunch at the hotel midday. The supervisor was a second shift worker, so she'd come in around 3 p.m., just after the manager's lunch breaks. Average pay for positions is pretty well known in my company, and it was strange when all of a sudden the supervisor had fancier things than she'd ever had before, shortly after this manager showed up. I'm talking a new Acura and a brand new pair of bolt-ons. This speculated rumor was never officially reported to me, but since the official report stated that the manager knew about this supervisor diddling with the employees and is covering it up, I pursued it during my investigation. After investigating, I was able to prove that the manager purchased a brand new set of bolt-ons for the supervisor, as I caught him in a lie during the interview process. He never admitted to the car. I also never had hard ha, evidence of the BJ happening. There was the witness that reported it, who couldn't be 100% certain she was doing that deed, but rather someone on their knees next to someone else with no other witnesses doesn't equal slubbing in the HR world. Fast forward 2 years, the supervisor divorced her husband and is now married to the non-management employee. So yeah, I probably, absolutely, screwed up that one. Manager got demoted and relocated to another facility because he was only 8 months from retirement. So the company let him get his pension. Not my call. This was unfortunately over a decade ago, when dirty-related items in the workplace were swept under the rug for higher-ups. Now it's pretty much insta-fired, no matter who you are, thank goodness. So, yeah, that was my first investigation when I got promoted into HR. Story 27? I was in an HR program at college while working at a bar. One night closing up, it was the bartender, one of the owners, and me. I'd been there about a week. Well, the owner made comments to the female bartender of an innuendo manner. The bartender laughed it off. The owner opened a bottle of champagne and offered it to us. Glasses were accepted. She was counting the fridges beneath the bar. He walked over and offered to pour her more champagne. I went to the kitchen to shut down the dish pit. I heard her make a noise, so went out to check on things. He stood over her kneeling still doing inventory. He had her by the hair, trying to feed her champagne against her will while using some very derogatory language. "Hey, what the heck?" I said on one hand. Everyone was dating or ducking a coworker. But this was clearly non-consensual. The owner sobered up all of a sudden, said he was leaving, called us both idiots, and left while the bartender got up and fixed herself. I checked on the bartender, who was clearly trying to minimize what had just happened, but thanked me for saying something. Apparently the owner got this way sometimes when he did substances. Well, the bartender had enough. She filed a complaint with corporate and asked if I'd witness for her. Of course. Over the next week, various other ladies from staff thanked me. Some asked why I didn't hit him with a chair, etc. I had a labor relations exam to write at the same time. Corporate wanted to speak to me in regards to this investigation. So I had to ask for a rescheduling from my professor. I tried to push for extra credit as I was actively doing labor relations and HR adjacent stuff, but she said no to that. Story 28. One of the employees was having random grinder hookups in the bathroom at work so his wife wouldn't find out. He would go missing for a half hour at a time, multiple times a day. We watched the camera to figure out what he was doing. Over and over again, he would lead different guys into the bathroom. One day alone, we counted 6 different guys. We confronted him about it, was in the process of letting him go, and all of a sudden he grabs a pair of scissors and holds them to his throat, screaming about how we ruined his life, and he's going to end it all. Little did he know security was walking in when he was going off. The security officer walked right behind him, and in one motion got the scissors and was restraining the guy. We called the police and ambulance. They took him away. About a month and a half later, he came back. Story 29. Boss's husband in my first job thought I was ducking his wife, kept calling the office and using a weird accent to see if I was at work with her. Then one day, he called me to meet at the pub to apologize for it. I resigned shortly after as it was just too weird. Plus, she was hardcore religious and kept accusing me of being an addict and for stealing. None of the accusations were accurate. Fine, I was definitely smoking at the time, but still. Story 31. I received a very threatening call at my office from a woman who accused me of having an affair with her boyfriend. I answered and didn't even get to the "thanks for calling XYZ company, how can I help?" when she started yelling and threatened to find me and beat the crap out of me. So confused and very shaken. I worked for a staffing company and we got an order for a temp to start immediately. This was for a highly specialized and experienced person, mind you. I called a woman in our database and left a message. I also called her secondary and left a message. Thanks to caller ID, I was able to search the number that she called from and had my boss call her to figure out what the heck was going on. Turns out she went through her incoming call log and didn't recognize the number, so she called it. Hearing a woman answer, she flipped and assumed the worst. We put her on the blacklist after that. 2. Same company a few years later. Had a great mid-level temp employee we sent out to numerous employers and finally got her a temp to perm position. 3 months temp probation, and then they would hire her permanently. 2 months in, and she no call, no shows. Doesn't answer or respond to messages, so after 2 days they terminate her. We are worried because this was odd. She had been very reliable up to this point. A week goes by, and she reappears, claiming she had been kidnapped by her ex-boyfriend and he drove her out of state and she had no way to contact anyone. We are shocked and horrified and try to get her back with the temp to perm, but they already had a new person in the role. A few days later, someone on our team saw her public social media photos showing the week she was kidnapped. She was actually on vacation at the beach. And we straight up fired her, the only time I ever let someone go and didn't feel bad. Oh, this was also during the MySpace's reign, so being aware that social media wasn't private wasn't a thing yet. Story 31. I worked at an ad agency where the head of AIR sent a company-wide email and attached an unsecured Excel spreadsheet containing everyone in the company's salary. It was a crazy 24 hours or so after that, and several people walked when they found out what coworkers and peers were making over them. And it put some pretty nasty pay-related inequality on display. She was not fired. Story 32. Worked at a car rental company in my 20s. I worked at the airport location, where we had a manager and an assistant manager. There were some issues at the airport location. Some of them were caused by management telling the reps to do things, and then writing us up when the main office didn't like what we were told to do. My response was to start typing notes that said, per MX was done. When she caught on, she started changing the notes in the system. So I started going in and changing them back. But that's not the story I wanted to tell. So due to issues at the airport, and only having a manager and assistant manager, they wanted to add a shift lead position to help take up some of the slack. We had one employee that was a real go-getter, very professional. His numbers were always good, etc. Since our most senior rep wasn't interested in changing her hours to take the position, we're certain that C was going to get it. Big meeting at the main office to make the announcement. All of us are sitting around the table, and the big boss finally opens the door and comes in, followed by manager, followed by HR, followed by assistant manager, followed by 2 police officers. They arrest C. After he'd been let out in cuffs, we got the story. Apparently, money had been going missing from the safe, a little here, a little there. They had been investigating for months and finally got the proof they needed. To say that we were all shocked was an understatement. A few of us knew that some money had gone missing. An entire cash bag had been emptied a few weeks before, but literally no one had suspected C was responsible. So after everyone had recovered from the shock, they announced the new shift lead. It was a little anticlimactic. Story 33. This is a good one. I was with my MD one day when we had a call from our auditors who had spotted that one of our subcontractors had the same name as a company owned by our FD. We were sure it was a coincidence, but then the auditor says they have the same VAT number. Whoops. FD was suspended and investigation began. Turned out a senior sales manager and the FD were old friends. And also joint directors of this subcontractor, and the SSM had been creating work for the subcontractor to do, and the FD has been signing off the invoices for payment. We worked out that the FD had pocketed about £80,000 sterling in profits before our auditors spotted the discrepancy. But wait, it gets better. Because in our investigation, we discovered one of the finance officers was leaking details of our discoveries to the FD while he was suspended. We immediately suspended her too, and in the course of that investigation, it turned out that they, both married to other people, had been having an affair, and her husband was our very popular and well-liked logistics manager. He found out about the affair and not only told us, but also the FD's wife. The whole thing got referred to the police eventually. FD resigned before we could fire him. SM was fired. Finance officer was fired. Eventually, we also discovered that the FD had been making unauthorized loans to himself. And I knew they were unauthorized because I was also the payroll manager, and it was my job to authorize loans for several £1,000s. I think we sued him for that money eventually and had a county court judgment against him that prevented him from being the director of any business, forcing him to wind up his little scam business. And we also reported him for ethical violations to his chartered professional body. Story 34. I used to work in a nursery for kids age 0, 5. The director was male, around 50, married with 4 children, some of them young and some of them young teenagers. He was super friendly and got on well with everyone. There was a nursery worker who started at 18 but was now 19. She was a nice but quiet girl with a troubled family. The director left his wife for her. It left a really bad taste in everyone's mouth. Story 35. 2 people I hired were having a consensual relationship. They got caught about a year after I quit. Pay was crap. Management was the crap that crap craps. And there was a policy forbidding it. One was fired. The other took all of his leave, straddled the annual leave date, took 6 weeks off, then quit. Then I officiated their wedding in my office at the firm I started. Former employers tried to C&D me for competing until they figured out what I do now is nothing at all like what they do. Story 36. I was an HR guy for a while, and we had the usual marital problems with expats, usually those who left their families in their home country for education. The worst, however, was when I moved to sales and was a project manager for a while. Routine data dumps from a distributor, and there seemed some oddities which I showed the finance guy in my team. He said he'd look into it. Not relevant sales data, out of scope for me. Fast forward a year, he got transferred to internal audit and I got moved into field sales. We hadn't seen each other in months and he called me for dinner and drinks while I was in the head office. There, he told me this was paid for by his team and he had to talk to me. He told me those transactions we found a year back were for another division. I was like, why the F was it posted there? Apparently, it was a huge scandal of moving sales around dumping stocks in other areas, illegally collecting incentives and commissions and splitting it across some people, including VP levels. I asked why the hell he was telling me. He said, Crapstorm is coming next week, and knowing me, I'd have put 2 and 2 together, worked some weird calculus crap, and figured it out. This was him basically telling me to keep my mouth shut. And crap was the sales organization hit hard. Resignations, distributor changes, new policies, legal all over the place, the works. A lot of us, even us in the other divisions, did a lot of speculating over drinks. He was right, I would have figured it out. My boss at the time, great guy, also a vice president, didn't know the whole story. And one of the culprits was his batch and a friend. I couldn't tell him. Story 37. My buddy took the office bully's lunchbox to the bathroom and took a crap in it, put it back in the fridge for him to find. Guy went crazy yelling and telling everyone about it. Wanted to do a DNA sample of everyone in the office to find out who it was. My buddy quit a few months later, but said it was the most intense and hilarious thing he's ever seen. Story 38. Not HR, but a shop steward with many years of experience. Things I've had to explain to workers facing termination over the years. In a, you really can't do this and expect to keep your job discussion. Having sex with a coworker at your desk. During business hours, in front of a floor-to-ceiling window facing a major public street. Keeping megabytes of adult film on your work computer in a folder labeled with your name. Falsifying your work hours to claim when you're actually on vacation in another country. Having sex with someone who isn't your spouse and doesn't work in your work site, but who is a direct report to your spouse at hers. Showing up to work blazed and dancing on your desk where the public can see you. Checking out a digital camera and accidentally returning it with CP on it that you shot and are visible and identifiable in several photos on. Following your opposite manager home from work several times, right after having had a very public screaming match with one. Taking the office jeep to the beach on the weekend with your dogs, who were quite wet coming back, physically assaulting a coworker, more of these than you would think. Bringing guns in your backpack to a government building on a day when the governor is visiting. Those are off the top of my head. There are so many more. Story 39. Not HR, but I once received an email that wasn't meant for my eyes. A female coworker was angry with a male coworker, both from a different department. I didn't know them, since he had promised to leave his wife for him after they already had a lengthy affair. I told my boss, and he recommended I would simply delete the email and pretend it didn't happen. Story 40. Obligatory not HR, but worked at a gas station. It was a tiny one on property of a grocery store. We were considered a department of the store, sold their product, etc. Management noticed that there had been some frequent and constant calls to 900 numbers from the gas station. They sent someone over to watch the footage. Now picture this. The back of the gas station was one long hallway that led to a desk, barely enough room for 3 people to stand side by side. If you opened the door to the back office, the manager would have his back turned to you. There was also a bathroom to the left halfway down the hall, which doubled as storage. So some poor security guy is standing at the back desk watching footage and finds the gas station manager pounding off in the chair. This guy is probably now sitting in, touching the same desk, the same armrests, everything. This manager would turn his back to the other employee, sit in the back and pound away at himself, dialing 900 numbers. I can only imagine the moment he saw that and probably leapt out of the chair to go wash his hands. Story 41. The head of my department had an affair with an apprentice, got her pregnant, so he left his partner, not married, and 2 kids for her. They had a shotgun wedding, and if that wasn't enough. Within a year, she accused him of attempted and took him back to her family at the other end of the country with the baby and was never seen again. Story 42. The manager was having an affair with one of our team members, and no one knew. It was lunchtime, and his wife came to surprise him and drop some food off. Me, my other colleague, and his wife were walking together towards the kitchen. She was telling us how her husband has been working so late, and he doesn't get time to eat lunch, so she wanted to make sure he doesn't overwork. We walked down towards the small corridor towards the kitchen, and saw the manager spanking our team member while she was up against the wall. His wife dropped the food bags in shock and was trembling and fainted. My colleague called an ambulance. Manager and team member were fired for their inappropriate behavior on company grounds. We don't know what happened to the wife. Story 43. I was asked by HR to do forensics on a work computer used by a manager, 40 years old male, who was being accused of sexual harassment by a subordinate, 25 years old female. Her claim was he sent her adult film on company email. And when she complained about being passed over for a cool project, his response was to grin and say she could earn the next cool project. His claim was that it was mutual flirting, that she was an equal participant, and that she only complained because he assigned the cool project to a more qualified employee, and that she was told she needed to earn the cool projects by improving her skill set. Their email histories showed that they had both sent each other NSFW images, adult film and cartoons, no selfies, and engaged in mutual flirting. The context of the conversation about earning the project was impossible to prove either way as it was verbal. Didn't matter though. He was her manager, not a peer. The power disparity makes it very difficult to prove whether she was a willing participant or if she went along out of fear for her job. He should never have placed himself in that position. He was fired, lost a six-figure bonus that he was on track for, annual sales performance target for his office of 50 people, and he would up getting divorced. She stayed on with the company and continued as an engineer until she moved on to better and brighter things about 3 years later. Story 44. I worked for Sony's retail division when they had stores, providing the stores support for their point-of-sale systems. All the stores had an old PIN pad that could be hooked to a phone line to process credit cards if the main system was down. One guy who was in support figured out how to take a spare PIN pad and make himself two $5,000 gift cards. The sad part was he'd probably never have gotten caught if he didn't give it to his Git friends. One friend goes to a store and wants TVs, stereos, PlayStation 3S, etc. The store manager rang him up, saw he was paying with a gift card, got suspicious, and asked for his ID. He said he left it in his car and said he'd be right back. The manager quickly made a photocopy of the card while he was away. When he returned, he told the manager he didn't have it because he didn't drive to the store, which didn't make sense because he said he had left it in his car. He gave the card back and left with nothing. The manager sent all the information and launched an investigation leading to the original support guy who made the gift cards. They made a big show by taking him out in handcuffs. But here's the messed up part. He was never charged with anything and turned around and sued Sony for unpaid overtime and won. Story 45. At the previous company where I worked, there was a couple in their 20s working in the warehouse. The girl was cheating on the guy with the boss who was some 30 years older than her. We all suspected because they were flirting at work right in front of the poor guy. Some people I knew tried to talk to him about it, and he said she would never cheat and they were just friends. That same boss fired that guy after a year or so of this going on, who was in turn fired by his leader. The guy that was cheated on and fired tried to end his life afterwards. There were some people that tried to have that girl fired because of the morale at the workplace, but HR said, affair is not a fireable offense. As far as I know, she still works at that company and does her job, even though nobody really likes her. We are in Europe. Story 46. 2 months after starting in HR, I noticed the store manager's wife came around every week and talked way too long to me. One day I was at home and got a group text from the store manager to the management team, confessing to an affair and detailing where they were meeting, the employee's full name, and more. Of course, I had to terminate the store manager. He was breaking a serious policy. 3 awful things happened. 1. I had to clean out his office. I found her love letters and nudes. The employee absolutely loved him, it was clear. 2. I had to transfer her to another location, but everyone knew what happened. It was like someone destroyed the light inside her. He didn't leave his wife for her. She seemed like a shell of herself. 3. All the employees in my store knew they had a relationship. It had been going on for years. They assumed I knew too. I realized then how naive I was. Story 47. Not HR, tech, software company were tipped off by their bank and discovered a financial analyst was embezzling funds, progressively more monthly for 2 years, totaling $500,000. He was fired and sued. As part of the settlement, the company got his fancy BMW condo and his GF's engagement ring. Within 3 months, he landed a top government job, having lied in his cover letter and interview, claiming he still worked for the software company. His girlfriend posed as a reference via telephone. He got promptly fired and charged. He was sentenced to 1 year in prison, 3 years probation. In the time between being fired by the government and sentencing, he had landed another corporate job, who were aware of both criminal incidents. Story 48. 1. I'm not an HR person, but I was in the room sitting in a chair in the corner with my friend who works with me, and someone who just got fired came in screaming and yelling at the new girl. And when we tried to walk out, he pulled a knife on my friend, and my friend hit the knife out of his hand and threw him on the table and beat the crap out of him. 2. The receptionist had sex with the boss in the bathroom. Story 49. Employee A shoulder-surfed employee B's Twitter handle found that she was crap-talking employee C on there with names removed and told HR and C, despite C being on holiday at the time. B got called into HR and forced to take the tweets down, even though it was none of their business. Even though it was anonymized, and A only knew it was about C because he recognized the situation being detailed, even though A had to shoulder surf the handle. Source: I was B, and while I folded like a cheap suit for the sake of a quiet life, nothing will change the fact that C was and remains the worst human being I have ever personally encountered, with a crap-stirring brown noser with all the personality of a cardboard cutout of himself, not far behind. Story 50. Not HR, but I had to deal with it. Longtime loyal employee is suddenly gone when I come back from being sick, so it's sudden and shocking. Later I find out that he's been busted for spending nearly $40,000 over the last few years making personal purchases on the company card. We're a small company and my manager wasn't checking card statements as closely as he should have. But finally, an accountant noticed a charge for an Xbox. I was able to pull most of the receipts on his spending history, since they were at stores like Walmart and Target. Kind of broke my heart to see the picture being painted. He'd often grab a toy and snacks for his daughter, whom I met a few times and she was very sweet. He used the card for gas, groceries, commute tolls, fast food delivery, toy collectibles, and even airfare. I was on the phone with a Target rep because she had to pull each receipt individually. No wonder he could afford all the custom toys he was posting on a single dad income. Unfortunately, I'm not privy to the details on the mediation. We had to file a police report for insurance purposes, but I think it was settled out of court. It's pretty rich that he claimed he was laid off after years of loyalty on social media. What's your coworker meltdown story? Story 1. Pizza Hut manager asked one of the drivers to put on his uniform shirt. Driver flipped out and tried to set his shirt on fire in the lobby while screaming about oppression. Then he took off for some reason and drove to the airport where he jumped the fence leading to the tarmac, got roughly arrested by the airport cops. We never saw him again. It turned out he had drank a bunch of substances. Story 2. This one was sad. I worked at a computer firm in the late 98S, early 2000 AS. We had a female tech dispatcher who had recently had gastric bypass surgery, allowing her to once again fit into all of her 80s clothes again. We had a tech who was a good-looking guy and flirted with all the ladies, but he was married with 3 small kids and he was an alcoholic. This poor woman had it so bad for this guy. One night, a bunch of us went out for drinks. The tech and the dispatcher got drunk and left together. Fast forward 1 week later, and we find out that he hung himself. Fortunately, he lived, but he had suffered severe brain damage and was pretty messed up. Eventually, his wife left him, and the last I heard was that he was living with the other woman, and she had taken over as his caregiver. Twisted crap right there. Story 59. PhD hired from large pharma that will remain nameless to a big 20-people academic lab run by a big dog researcher. Was kind of off-kilter to begin with. Not just your regular lab weirdo, quiet mostly. Made off-the-wall comments, no social skills. Was super paranoid that people were going to steal his data. This got worse and worse, and pretty much descended into not talking to anyone. He had wormed out of talking about his work at meetings. For a good 6 months before the PIA, a bossman cornered him, insists he present at a meeting. So he puts up this by PPT that basically has a couple of squiggly lines with some acronyms on it. This was supposed to be a mediator model for some basic physiological process he was studying in sugar metabolism. Bossman asks him what this is. Mr. PhD refuses to say to the boss. Boss insists. He again refuses. Bossman tells him that he pays him, so he'd better cough up. Nope, no deal. Both get pissed. PhD goes nuts, wrecks the room, has to be held down by other postdocs and whatnot to keep him from attacking Bossman. Security gets called, and he is hauled away to the psych unit, diagnosed psychotic. I saw him walking the streets about 6 months later. Story 3. A guy just went bat crap at one point when a manager spoke to him for taking time off of the phone after a hard call. This is in a telemarketing company. The dude lost his crap, screamed out the manager, and left. Then he went on a popular forum and spilled all the company bullcrap. We had press and crap trying to ask us questions. Story 4. When I was in high school, I was a busser at a kind of fancy steak place. Think Ruth's Chris, but just a tad more casual. Anyway, this one kid who bussed with me was moving out of state and decided to not give a 2 weeks notice. The last day he was able to come in before he moved, he walked up to like 2 or 3 tables and just ripped the nastiest sounding farts I'd ever heard. I accidentally walked in the back when the manger was firing him. Manager says, "Why would you do that instead of just telling me you quit?" My buddy responds, "I damn hate this place." He then farted again and walked out. It's not so much a meltdown, but it's still pretty amusing. Story 5. I was working in a fast food kitchen, and we hired this shifty-looking guy in his 50s named Chicago. His first day, he started complaining because we kept him on only one task, because he was new and still slow. Before we know it, he was yelling, "Y'all just don't want me to shine. Y'all just scared." Then he just walked out muttering that this place was too dirty to work in. We had just opened, so the place was in no way dirty. Story 6. Waiting tables? He goes in the bathroom and doesn't come out for an hour. I took all of the tables for the section while he was gone. When he comes out very clearly on some type of substances, he is angry. I stole tips from him by not waiting for him to get back before I seated people. He cusses as he walks out. Came back a week later demanding the tips from the tables that he should have waited on. Story 7. I used to work at a bookstore with 2 guys named Sean and Warren. Sean was a real abrasive a hole, loved insulting people and getting under their skin. And as such, a lot of people hated Sean, but nobody hated him more than Warren. Warren had some anger management issues, and with the way Sean kept pushing his buttons, it was only a matter of time before Warren snapped. We all knew there was going to be a showdown between them at some point. We did not expect it to happen behind the cash wrap 2 days before Christmas in front of about 100 customers. I was on the other side of the store when it happened, and by the time I rushed over, the fight had already been broken up. I don't know what Sean said to Warren, but Warren had finally snapped and punched Sean, and it turned into an all-out brawl between the two. Since Warren had thrown the first punch, we told him to go home, and Sean stayed at the cash wrap. I started helping a customer find a book in our computer system when there was another commotion next to me. Warren had taken the combination lock off his locker from in back and was now bashing Sean over the head with it. I had to grab Warren, pull him off and calm him down, and he finally left. I then just went straight back to helping the customer find the book she wanted, and Sean went in back to calm himself down. Sean wound up quitting because he was afraid he'd get fired. I don't know if he would have, and Warren was fired. Last I'd heard of Warren, he was on trial for attempted murder. Story 8. Tina. Tina worked at my first retail job with me. I was 17. She was a catty, spoiled 50-something woman with a rich husband. Why she bothered to work a crappy retail job? The only reason I can think of is that she was so vindictive and that she needed people to take it out on. Tina once stole 25 boxes of store logo reusable shopping bags because we never put them out, so I figured we weren't going to sell them. Tina did not like our store manager. Anytime her and the store manager walked into the break room while she was there, she would make a point of farting loudly. Tina frequently gitted that she needed a chair when she was on register. She couldn't stand for very long because she'd had a child. Her only child was her 20-year-old son. Tina was once assigned stocking the seasonal decoration aisle. She didn't want to do it and retaliated by spending an 8-hour shift folding and refolding our tiny section of towels. Tina broke one of the toilets by using the plunger to pry the seat off, rather than simply unclick the 2 tabs holding it on, to clean it. It got better when the seat finally gave out, through what I can only imagine is a sign that no one didn't want her working there. The seat apparently flew upwards with sufficient force as to knock the tank cover off, causing it to crack in pieces on the floor. The meltdown. About once every 6 months, we'd have a night where we came in after the store closed to rearrange, build shelves, or other tasks that would be difficult to do when the store was open. It normally took only an hour or two, which we were paid time plus half for. Tina, naturally, hated these. She'd get the entire time, make mean remarks about the manager when she was out of earshot, and just make the night longer for everyone else. This time, right as she said, "Christine, manager is such a little damn brat," guess who was right behind her? Christine lost her crap. One of 2 times I ever saw her do so. She let out 8 months of pent-up aggression out in about 30 seconds, finishing up with, "You are done here, for good. Get the hell out of my store." Tina responded. All in all, Tina's rampage cost the store around $8,000 in damages. She knocked over several huge shelves, knocked our cash registers off the counter, destroying everything except the drawers, and threw a planter through the manager's office window before storming out. Now, the story doesn't end there. See? Our registers were very intricately hooked up so that corporate could see every login, transaction, etc. All of the wires were ripped out during Tina's rampage. And not 10 seconds after she bailed, our phone was ringing and some suit down at HQ in Dallas was asking why in the duck our entire store just went offline. Our manager explained the situation in great detail. Corporate asked every employee who was there to fill out an incident report. We turned all of these in, and about a week later, our regional manager comes in with some guy in a suit. The company was paying to hire a lawyer to sue Tina for damages. The company won. I don't know if they ever got their money or not, but for months, we joked that our manager should file assault and emotional distress charges against Tina for the farting. Story 9. I don't know if this counts as a meltdown, but at my previous company, our IT guy used to get naked in the server room. No idea why. He just did. One day, one of the ladies in HR with computer problems walks in there without knocking. Anne finds him naked with a jar of peanut butter, not sure what he was doing with that. IT guy gets dressed and goes to HR and quits and storms out about an hour later. And for some reason, when he left, the guy left the jar of peanut butter in the server room. Story 10. A manager that wasn't really my manager. When his bosses were gone, he would take 2-hour lunches on the clock. We were allowed a 30-minute lunch off the clock. He would sit in the management office and eat a little, read the paper, just basically not working while the store got busy. It was fairly well known by the lower workers. He did this. We just didn't say anything. One day, a manager of equal power from a different department confronted him about it while he had been on lunch for over an hour. He picked up his sandwich and threw it at her, yelling about why doesn't he get to take his lunch in peace like everyone else. Basically, just went on this rant of irrelevant stuff. Then just stopped and went back to reading the paper. He was fired by the end of the day. Story 11. Woman kept taking off and coming in late. She was about 50. Eventually, the boss called her in and asked, "What is going on?" The woman just loses it, saying it's none of their business. Boss tells her that they will have to let her go if she misses one more day or is late again this year as she missed. 15 days unscheduled, used her sick time and vacation days and was late every day by up to an hour, and it was only April. And they will be docking her for those hours she wasn't here or left early. Woman starts screaming, "You don't have that right! You can't take my money! Damn you, just damn you!" Eventually, she pulled the mat on top of the desk of sending papers and the computer to the floor. Boss booked it and locked her in the room where she continued to kick holes in the drywall and break everything in sight. Security comes, they call the police. Police come go in and she started throwing stuff at them, screaming, "That's my damn money. We were escorted off the floor, and I'm guessing they tased her or something because she was taken out handcuffed to a wheelchair. Story 12. It wasn't exactly a meltdown, at least not at first. Working in it for a debt collection agency, and a coworker in our department is tasked with updating a server after hours. He's supposed to stay late Friday and do this. This is our primary database. It runs the whole business. It cannot be down during business hours. I walk into the tense conversation my boss and coworker are having about this, and it's obvious that his hamster is spinning at full speed to get out of it. Eventually, a company-wide email goes out to the effect, server will be going down for maintenance Friday at 5 p.m. Everything seems fine. Coworker is fuming about not being respected and is acting in general like a gift for a couple of days. He's kind of a git most days. We really don't pay any mind. Friday rolls around and his office door stays shut all morning. Our boss heads out for lunch at noon, and at 12:15 p.m. we are all simultaneously logged out of the server. My other coworker and I rush to the server room where we find our third coworker, who was tasked with upgrading the server. We both stand there, mouths wide open, and can't even begin to find words. I turn, walk out, and call our boss's cell. Hi, I know you are on lunch, but coworker just started the server upgrade and the entire company is down. I thought you would like to know before owner or president calls. What? I repeat myself as the president walks in behind me, which I am not aware of. He hears everything, starts to open his mouth to me, realizes I am the messenger, not the problem. Turns, walks into the server room, and explodes on our coworker. In the middle of this, our boss comes in, hears the screaming, and realizes he is too late to even attempt damage control. The argument is quickly going nuclear. He's mad. The president is mad. Coworker looks like a kid on Christmas morning. This is where, in the experience, we thought he had gone mad. We were all expecting that to be the moment he had a total meltdown. It's a train wreck. We think we are watching our coworker self-destruct. The non-git coworker and I can't look away. And that's when our git coworker said, "Well, I thought we were just glorified, overpaid clerical workers who had no impact on collections. So I didn't see why my clerical work needed to wait until after hours on Friday, since it didn't have any effect on the business. It is just overpaid and overglorified clerical staff," was a comment the owner had made more than once and had gone unchecked on. It was the justification for our pay freezes, our low salaries, lack of overtime, lack of comp time. Basically, everything going that would have balanced the scales for the extra time we had the entire IT department, spent in various crisis situations. After hours on the weekends, over holidays, coming in when we were supposed to be off, in the middle of the night, and the times we had worked 24 hours in a row just to keep things running. We couldn't help it. We grinned. We all four grinned like crazy idiots. We knew, we understood. We could fault him for it professionally, but personally we couldn't help ourselves from feeling just a couple inches taller. And that's when I thought the president was going absolutely lose it. Our boss waved us away, told our coworker to just get it finished quickly, and steered the president into his office. The server came back up. The coworker spent hours getting reamed, but managed to keep his job, and we were never called clerical staff again. And we started getting a little bit of comp time and extra pay for those situations where we worked above and beyond. It wasn't much. It certainly wasn't overtime pay, and it still took 2 weeks' notice to use comp time, and it had to be used within a month. But it felt better. Story 13. Well, I had a meltdown at work once. I worked at a very small dog boarding and grooming shop in college. My boss handwrote our schedule and posted it on the wall each week, so I'd take a picture of it with my phone so I'd have it with me. One time she decided after she had posted the schedule and I had taken my picture that Ash wanted me to come in half an hour later that Thursday to do grooming rather than my usual boarding work. She changed it on the schedule but never mentioned it to me. So I came in at the time, on the schedule that was in my phone. The receptionist says to me when I come in that I'm scheduled for grooming, not boarding. So I say okay and wait for the first grooming dogs to show up so I can start brushing them and trimming their nails. Well, when the boss arrives 15 minutes later and sees me already there, brushing a dog before my shift starts, she flips out. Lyd tells me to put the dog in a kennel and then walks me around to all the boarding rooms saying things like, "Well, why didn't you clean this and this?" She accused me of trying to steal money from her by coming in early and forced me to change my clock in time to the time on the schedule. Mind you, an extra half hour is only $4. I point out that she never told me she changed the schedule, so I came in according to the schedule in my phone. But she just yells at me some more. Now this happened at the end of the semester when projects were due and finals were coming up, so I was already stressed out. Plus, this wasn't the first time she'd treated me like crap. So I had what I can only describe as an anxiety attack, mental breakdown type thing. I burst into tears. My legs were shaking so bad I could hardly stand, and I kept yelling right back at her trying to defend myself. She looked rather shocked and backed off a bit. I wanted to quit so bad, but I needed the money for rent and food. So as soon as I calmed down, I went back to working my shift. I did quit later, though, after I had found another job and the majority of the rest of the staff had quit due being sick of the boss's crap. She verbally abused everyone there. Story 14. Having worked in telco tech support for a few years at the front line and second levels, many moons ago, I saw a few of these. I wish to preface that none of these people were fired for this, although many of them quit on their own accord shortly afterwards. One coworker was getting exceptionally frustrated at a customer who didn't quite understand the concept of click the OK button. After several attempts at this, he yelled in a fit of anger, "Click the damn OK button." As I didn't reach the mute button in time, the customer I was on the phone with started laughing and mentioned how it sounded like someone was having a bad day. The mute button was often your friend in coworker meltdown stories in phone tech support. 2. Shortly after I became a second-level agent, a coworker of mine who was particularly high-strung would go from 0 to 100 pretty quickly. Without any warning, he ended up ripping his headset off his head and yelling "damn" as loudly as his lungs and larynx would allow him. The manager, who was on duty at the time, was a lovely woman emerged from her office just to see this employee smash his headset to pieces. He got the rest of the day off. 3. We had a gentleman working who was doing the graveyard shift. Back at the time this story happened, it was done solo. He had a particularly bad phone call where a customer wasn't able to rent an adult film and was getting upset about it. Using language he probably wouldn't have used in a face-to-face encounter, the employee in question hung up the phone, left of the office, having made the quick decision to end his employment. Threw his ID in dumpster and went home to sleep. He later remarked that it was the best sleep he ever had. Story 15. I was working at an online store that specialized in Warhammer, etc. related items. We were super backed up and working late on Christmas Eve, packing items to ship. The goal was to finish that night, so we could all spend Christmas with our families. A few people were already on vacation, so it was myself, my good friend Jay, and this kid who I will call Sam. Sam was pretty socially challenged, even for a group of Warhammer players, and was very much so into LARP, well, I should say into ska. Think of Ren Fairs, but more serious. I was pretty upset at Sam because he arbitrarily decided to leave early and leave us working past midnight. We were having a discussion about LARP, which was one of my hobbies. Werewolf the Apocalypse represent. And I asked him about his LARP group. He got pretty heated and began to loudly inform me about how ska was not LARPing. Maybe it was because I was frustrated at him making us work late, but I decided that this was a perfect time to troll. I wasn't the bully type, and I admit that I do feel bad about badgering him. Well, you play fight with swords, right? As a character? With costumes? Why isn't that a LARP? And so on. Sam knocked over a folding chair and scurried out of the store. I got a pretty good laugh until this chubby 5 feet 5 inches, neck-bearded kid kicks open the door to the shop wearing a homemade armor bucket helmet, brandishing a wooden stick. "Not a LARP! Would you like to get hit in the face by this?" he yelled, walking furiously towards me with the stick raised above his head. "With a stick?" I said, trying to keep my composure. "It's a freaking long sword," he said, waving his stick around and knocking over some Warhammer boxes. The stick was then pointed right in my face. I raised my hands above my head, making claws, the werewolf LARP symbol for shifting into a werewolf. "Watch out! I'm turning!" I yelled, and then emitted a howl while laughing hysterically. The little git smacked me with his stick, and Jay pulled me back right before I made a bad life decision. "Take your stick and go home!" I yelled. "It's a sword!" he yelled before walking out forever. Story 16. Worked at a college bookstore. We had been wearing polo shirts for our uniform, but one day we got new button-ups before we opened. The ladies weren't made to be tucked, but the guys' shirts were. I was the only guy working there at the time. I tucked mine in, but I didn't realize the front of my shirt had gotten caught in my zipper. A new girl on the staff, based on nothing but seeing the front of my shirt and my zipper, decided I was harassing her. I guess she thought I was trying to flash her or something, but I never said anything or made any physical gesture that could be construed as a sexual advance. She wrote a note detailing this affront to her dignity and took it to my boss, another woman, in her office. My boss knows me, and she knows it would be unwise for me to start harassing a coworker. When all of my coworkers are women, she comes out and tells me my shirt is caught in my zipper. Mortified, I go to the bathroom to fix it, and I think, outside of me being a bit embarrassed, that's the end of it. At this point, I didn't know about the accusation of sexual harassment. The girl was very upset that her accusation wasn't taken more seriously. She went to the bathroom for about 2 hours, luckily it was a slow day, and comes back and starts cussing out my boss, who proceeds to take her back in her office and talk. Not understanding what the frustration was about at the time, I am very confused. New girl gets fired. As she leaves, she grabs about 4 packages of really crafty pens and sprints out the door. My boss explained the situation to me after she left. Story 17. I work at a vet hospital, and we had to take x-rays of a dog's tummy because it was having diarrhea and throwing up, so it had to be on its back. It was a decent-sized dog, a breed of pit bull, so it was definitely a 2-person job. I grabbed the front legs and my coworker grabbed the back legs, and we tried to keep the animal straight and on its back. The dog then violently projectile crap on my coworker, covering her in a 6-inch wide line from her chest to her hairline. She absolutely freaked, screaming and swearing and dry heaving and carrying on. Managed to keep the dog still for the x-ray though. We were all crying because we were laughing so hard. She would have done the same if we had been in her place. It was like laughing at a family member and not out of malice. Even she laughed about it later, days later. Story 18. This one's my meltdown. I'm military. This was when I was a private, lowest rank, working for NORAD. Before I start, it's okay to help someone. It's different come around and criticize and tell someone how to do something. And it's something else altogether to treat this person as though they're beneath you. I'm working an exercise for some bullcrap and this guy comes around and does the aforementioned things. I snap. I throw my headset on the ground, tell him to shut the duck up. Don't you ever damn talk down to me? Get the duck out of my section and go learn the damn regs before telling me, who is infinitely better than him at the job, how to do my damn job. He gets red in the face. The sergeant puts his hand on his shoulder before he gets a chance to respond and leans in and says, "It's probably best you get the duck out of my section, bud." SGT turns to me and says, "Sit the duck down, get back to work." Post-X debrief, I was brought up by other sections as a positive point for controlling the section. When reality, I felt like a piece of crap for snapping at someone like that, even though they deserved it. It happened one other time, except this time it wasn't to a peer, but to a superior ranked person, who came from a completely different section to tell one of my guys how to do his job. I was corporal by then, and was helping a newer guy do something uncommon, and that he was unfamiliar with, while others from my section gathered around to watch him and learn. It was a relatively interesting situation. This damn bozo shows up and starts telling my guy exactly what to do and what to say. And he's prompting this guy to perform completely damn unrelated actions. Imagine you're trying to find the answer to 2 plus 2 using nothing but windows, and this one tells you to open the magnifier, and the character map, and the text-to-speech, and cluttering your screen with as many useless apps as possible when I was trying to tell him to just open the calculator, and he's higher ranked. So they're paying attention to what he's saying instead of me. Who knew his damn job? Damn that. Who the heck are you? You're not ID, are you? It shows, "Get the duck back to weapons before I call your handlers." Handlers in this context are the officers of the section he worked for as their non-commissioned git. He ratted on me and I was brought to the back, so people can't hear you getting reamed out, and told to show respect for higher-ranked people. I said I wanted to make sure my guy did his job properly and that some duckface who doesn't know crap about ID shouldn't be telling my guys how to do their jobs, regardless of rank. Written up for calling him a duckface in front of the chain of command. Story 19. When I first started working retail, it was for this family-owned grocery store. It was fairly decent-sized and had a ton of loyal customers. I'd been working there for 5 months. I was 16 years old, and it was my first job. We had an older lady named Michelle who worked there, since it opened like 20 years ago. I had no keys to the register, and there were certain things I could and couldn't do, like refunds. Anyways, Michelle never ran the register. She kept the store stocked, because I was better at being the face of the store when people entered and was better at being on the register. I just didn't have keys, so I had to call her up to help. Michelle didn't like that, even though it was one of the reasons she kept her job after customers kept complaining that she was giddy to them. Well, I come in for my shift, and right off the bat, I get hit with like 3 returns, someone needing to break 100 bill. I wasn't allowed to do that. And finally, I ran out of 1S, 5S, and 10S, so I needed Michelle to come up and help me. Michelle stormed around the counter, threw open the safe where we kept more money, 1S, 5S, 10S, etc., and just threw the tray of money on the counter where it slid across the counter and landed on the ground, scattering money everywhere for customers to pick up. Luckily, the customers were decent people and handed me all the money and the broken till. I got myself set up, and despite being young, I decided to chastise Michelle because damn that childish behavior. All I got out was, "Come on, Michelle," before she pulled the lanyard with the keys around her neck off and chucking them at me with a resounding "damn you." And that was how I got promoted to key holder. Story 20. One employee decided to brave it, just to be daring, and park in the CEO's reserved parking spot, thinking the boss was away on vacation. He knew it was strictly forbidden, but did it anyway. His timing proved wrong. The CEO hadn't started vacation yet. It was fireworks when he got there and found the employee's car parked in his reserved spot. Those fireworks resulted in his being fired and held up as an example of what it means to be employed on an at-will basis. Story 21. When I worked at a theme park, we had one girl who was a problem from the very moment she got there. By the end of her first week, she was already on a lot of crap lists for the way she talked to people. She was still in high school and had a bit of a princess mentality. She was always bossing people around, including people who had worked there for 10 years. But if anyone asked her to help them, she would say that since they were technically equals, she didn't have to take any direction from them. She got 2 serious write-ups in her first 2 months and made massive ordeals trying to fight them. This was also around the time our yearly survey came out. A part of the survey involved writing a few things the park could improve upon, and she sent in a 6-paragraph essay calling out everybody she hated. She said that she felt she was working in a hostile work environment and didn't feel safe because everyone was always picking on her. I was technically her superior, and I personally never had a problem with her. She was a good worker whenever she was under my supervision, but I could definitely see how her personality would rub people the wrong way. However, she was one of those employees that needed to be constantly told to put their phones away. Anyway, in our department, you could potentially get soaked by some of the attractions. Once you got to be there a while, you eventually learned the timing and could avoid it most of the time. But there was always a chance of getting hit by a stray burst of water. One day, this girl got hit by one of the splashes. By this point, she should have known how to avoid them, but she disregarded that and was in the area anyway. She was drenched. Her phone happened to be in her pocket when this happened. Not only did her phone not have a case, but it already had a ton of deep cracks in it. Water got in the cracks and basically fried her phone. She made a huge scene, screaming, sobbing, and demanding to see every higher-up from our manager to the CEO. She demanded that the park reimburse her for the phone because it got damaged while she was on the clock. Everybody basically told her that her property was her own responsibility, and they wouldn't be paying for it. Since she probably shouldn't have had it in her pocket in the first place, knowing the risk of potential water damage. Being the 16-year-old princess that she was, she couldn't handle hearing this. She started trashing our storage rooms, and we had to send her home early. While the department heads were trying to figure out what to do with her, she beat them to the punch and quit over the phone right before her next shift. Her dad harassed the park for a couple weeks about paying for the phone, but they basically blew him off until he stopped calling. She was a mess. Story 22. I worked at a photo studio in one of the mall anchor store in the 90s. It's a Sunday during Christmas portrait season, which in the days before digital was August, November. There were 3 of us working. Myself, female, a woman who had been there as long as me, and a gentleman who'd been there for 2 months. Side story, the fellow, whom I will call Mo, had made inappropriate comments from day one. He had been escalating during his tenure to the point that we'd reported him to our manager, also a woman. She told us, "We're too busy to worry about that right now. It's only harassment. If it was assault, I'd do something about it." So we all sort of started ignoring him as best as possible and refused to work with him alone. The dude was 5 feet 5 inches and looked like Tattoo from Fantasy Island. Anyway, back to our Sunday. The waiting room was full of Taylors, Tylers, Dylans, and Parkers of various genders and ages, as well as their idealistic moms who expected us to coax out those winning smiles. Our appointment schedule had started getting behind walk-in list was so long that we had stopped taking names an hour after we opened, thanks manager, for scheduling us every 15 minutes and still expecting us to take the walk-ins. The natives had become unsurprisingly restless, but we were doing our best. A call to the manager yielded, "I have a hair appointment today and can't come in. You guys can handle it." Anyway, Mo takes a group back, which was the perfect storm of bad times for a portrait photographer. A roomy-eyed 3-year-old, a terribly tired 2-year-old, and a sleeping 6-month-old. Oh, and Mom was expecting freaking perfection for her $10 coupon price. Predictably, it goes real bad. The other woman and I were in our own studios with our own nightmares when Mo tries to pawn them off on us. We tell him we can't, as we're all so busy. I finished up around the same time Mo did. We went to the counter, and his mother was griping about how her kids were snotty and crying, and he didn't try hard enough, and Mo, all 5 feet 5 inches of him, somehow does a full-on leap straight up on top of the high counter. He starts waving his tiny arms around, screaming, "I can't take this anymore! Damn this place!" He then slowly looks into the woman's eyes and says in a rather ominous tone, "Damn you the most. These jeets here ignore me, but you have made me angry." And with that, he let off the counter and sashayed off into the sunset. I stood there, mouth agape. My co-worker, who'd heard the commotion, was standing at her door. There was not a peep from anyone in the room, not even the newborns. Being the first one to come to my senses again, I calmly grabbed a stack of my manager's business cards, handed them out to the still stunned onlookers, and comped the lady for her pictures. With us being 2 people down, I called the manager again, relayed the story, and told her if she wasn't there within the hour, the co-worker and I would be closing early, and I'd be happy to tell the district manager why. It took her 10 minutes to arrive. Story 23. Chef and kitchen lifer here. As anyone who's worked in a busy commercial kitchen will appreciate, some pretty dramatic displays of temper and total burnout meltdowns aren't unheard of, but I think the most impressive I've seen was a commits chef, let's call him Jason. We were working in London under an old-school head chef, Carlos, who wasn't exactly known for subtlety, quietness, and passivity. Actually, he was a complete idiot and a total bully who clearly got a wee boner over the fact he had power over others. A lot of the chefs wound up to a busy service by using a bit of the old Colombian marching dust, and wound down by putting the pints away or supplementing this with some herbal stress relief. No one more so than Jason. Anyway, long story short, After a concentrated period of bullying and intimidation by Carlos, Jason snapped. He was putting two finished dishes on the pass, nicely presented with a simple but different garnish of micro-herbs on each one. Jason was coming to the end of a 90-odd-hour week, was hungover, high, so, quite understandably, he got the garnishes the wrong way round, chervil on the pork, sage on the lamb instead of vice versa. He was just returning to his section when Carlos noticed what he'd done and went damn ballistic. He walks across the kitchen, grabbed poor ducked-up Jason, dragged him back to the pass and started to scream. Proper, high-pitched and full flow, scream at him about an inch from his face, with flecks of chef saliva bouncing off Jason's face. As I saw Jason's eyes glaze over and his body start to tense and shake, I knew crap was about to go down. Carlos, however, didn't. Too preoccupied by his own perceived omnipotence, he continued beasting Jason and at one point slapped him. In one fluid movement, Jason wriggled free from Carlos's grip, grabbed a heavy ladle from a pot of clarified butter, and smacked Carlos, knocking him dazed for a second and causing him to sway on his feet. Jay wasn't finished. The mental little git grabbed beat Carlos. Carlos went down. Jason walked to his section, calmly rolled up his knives, bagged, and walked out. Ambulance and cops came and later arrested him at home. The judge took into account provocation and self-defense, and he got away with 6 months, served 4, and got a cushy job in the prison kitchens. I know a lot of people will criticize substances use in the workplace. Quite rightly so, unless you're lucky enough to work in a dispensary. But honestly, if you could urine test every chef in your country right now and sack anyone testing positive for controlled substances, isn't going to be a whole lot of people eating in restaurants tonight? Trust me. Of course it was an overreaction, but when all's said and done, Carlos deserved a good kicking for his many sins, and that damn mug got everything that was coming to him. Next day, everyone except the kitchen porter upped and left to a new grill restaurant opening down the street and left Carlos at home to nurse his wounds and reflect on the fact he'd provoked the wrong geezer. Story 24. Back in my museum days, one girl I had supervised was promoted to a position equal to mine, but seemed to think she was now my boss. She didn't particularly like me. As time went by, she was making more and more careless errors I was having to catch and deal with. But when brought up, in meetings or with her directly, she would blame me or others for those errors, while also being sure to bring up anything I did wrong or she'd thought I'd done wrong. After a while, she started making a ton of mistakes in all aspects of her job. It hit the fan when within the space of a few days, the accountant discovered she hadn't made any deposits in over a month. Part of her job was to drop off deposits regularly from tickets, gift shop sales, etc. Field trips, teachers were complaining that she wasn't returning calls. And one day, she booked a large group tour with literally only me in to cover it. When I walked in that morning, saw the schedule, and flipped out, her first reaction was to blame me for not noticing sooner. Scheduling was squarely her job, and I would delegate tours and other tasks based on her schedule. Kind of back as swords, I know. But that was the setup at the time. Other colleagues reamed her out for the scheduling incident, and for trying to avoid responsibility for it. I'd had it at that point and finally wrote a long email to our exec director discussing all the errors I and others had to cover for, unaware at the time that the accountant was also complaining to the ED about the lack of deposits. No, she wasn't stealing them. The deposits were sitting on her desk, and she just hadn't been doing it. It also turned out that this girl was smearing me to the ed, so these incidents prompted further investigation, which thankfully cleared things up on my end. Anyway, that basically led to an intervention with the ed, and some others from management sitting this girl down and reading her the riot act, where she claimed job burnout for the errors. She was like 23 years old at this point, though we worked in an admittedly stressful environment. She was put on some sort of super probation, her work was double-checked, the scheduling procedure was rejigged, and she suddenly acted a whole lot nicer to me. A more depressing case from the same workplace was a guy they'd hired as facilities manager. He had Asperger's, now autism, I guess, and was an awesome dude, but simply not right for the job. He needed routines and got frustrated quickly, and pretty well his entire job description was deal with crap that goes wrong. He was skilled enough, but in stress would often snap at coworkers or engage in other inappropriate behavior. It was tough to see. His behavior got worse after a while. The ed was unsympathetic. I didn't particularly like her attitude towards him, though he was problematic, and she eventually canned him. Story 25. Temp screamed at boss. Not even sure why. Argument ended with her throwing her work badge at him and leaving, saying she let him know tomorrow if she still wanted to work there. Did I mention she was a temp? Security had her banned from the building and desk cleared out within the hour. Story 26. Worked with a guy who was severely bipolar, but back in a time when no one really knew what bipolar was. We were in it, and in a situation where a lot of processes that are automated today had to be done manually. One day, He sent out a ranty email about how he was the only one maintaining the email spam filter, that it was supposed to be a department job, and he was really mad that it had been left to him. I pointed out to him that I was helping, had done so that morning, and that if he felt like he was going it alone, that I'd start helping more. He just threw a meltdown fit, screaming at me that I was lying, threatening me, and just about threw something at me. Story 27. The meltdown was my own, but it was fueled by an extremely irritating coworker. I'm a very easygoing person. I hate confrontation. Having said that, I was working as a waitress, and one of the cooks was just a miserable cocksucker. They had him making salads and dipping cheese dip into a bowl. He really liked to clear all of his orders off the screen and make him ask for it. Then he'd ask, why? So, you're not just asking for what you already ordered, but now you have to explain yourself, which I hate doing. For a while, I did it out of habit, not thinking about it. But the more I unnecessarily explained myself, the more annoyed I became. One day after months of this, I finally snapped. We were slow in the transition from lunch shifts to dinner, so more coworkers were coming in and he liked to show off how annoying he could be. My customer asked me for an extra lime, so I asked him to give me one. Why? The customer asked, why? Never mind. I'll get it from the bartender. I'm pretty annoyed at this point. Then I deliver a fajita to a customer and the guy didn't give me the boat they ordered. A boat is a side of rice and beans for the fajita. Like everything else, he'd cleared it off, so I reminded him. I need a boat for this fajita. Why? To row down the Mississippi River. Why do you think, idiot? After he angrily slings the rice and beans and I take it out, he decides to put me in my place. Also, everyone heard that and I hurt his pride. I get back, quite red-faced and shaking a little. He says he didn't persuade. That would be appreciate when spoken by someone with a triple-digit IQ, the way I had been talking to him. Then it happened. You want to know what I don't persuade? Having to explain your job to you because you keep clearing all your orders off the screen. It's simple. I order, you make it. Customers ask me for it, I ask you. Just make it and shut up like everyone else. I screamed at him for a while, then dropped a rack of ribs on the floor, picked them back up, scalding my hand, and squished them between my fingers and had to stop myself from throwing them at him, so I just screamed for another one to be made. Guess what? He never asked me again. I didn't even get in trouble, and everyone looked at me like I was unstable and didn't talk much to me. Service industry blows a big one. Story 28. So I'm 23 or 24, right out of college, working as an administrative assistant. There are lots of other AAs, most of them my age, but a couple that are middle-aged women out to pasture. The older women like to act like they're your superior and live to get the younger AAs in trouble. They also can't use computers, but rather than making them do their job, the bosses would just dump it on one of the younger. This one woman, we'll call her Linda, sat next to me and was constantly trying to get me in trouble. So one rainy day, I get into work and sitting in the middle of my cubicle is a pair of wet, dirty, disgusting sneakers being dried by my space heater. I'm like, what the heck? The only thing I can think of is that my friend, one of the other AAs, is trying to be funny. The office is freezing, and this girl and I often run space heaters under our desk, much to the consternation of Linda, who blames us for her hot flashes. Anyway, the shoes are hideous and don't seem to be something that my friend would wear. But she is the only person in the office that I have the kind of relationship with where that would be okay. So I walk over to her desk to ask her. She sits catty-corner to me in the next row and over the wall from Linda. So I'm like, hey, are those your shoes in my cube? And she says, what are you talking about? I explain the situation and she's like, what? That's so weird. Who would do that? Linda hears us talking over the wall and flips the duck out. She starts screaming, damn you! This is company property! I can use it for whatever I want. I am so sick of you, damn! You don't own the office! It's not your space heater! It was! She's literally stomping up and down the aisle, screaming and swearing and throwing crap. My friend and I are on the other side of the wall, just frozen, staring at each other with our mouths hanging open. The woman who sat on the other side of me is on the phone with an important client, and she has to quickly get off the phone. People are coming out of their offices to see what is going on, and Linda is just raging. Finally, she grabs her shoes and stomps off down the hall, muttering about damn children who think they can damn tell her what to do. My friend looks at me and says, well, that was super inappropriate. Story 29. So, I was that person. In the span of 2 years, I was forced to switch jobs to a more demanding job with no pay increase. Then other people began quitting and I was saddled with their tasks, once again, without a pay increase. I suffer with depression and anxiety. I began to become increasingly depressed and paranoid that I wasn't living up to expectations and that my coworkers, that I loved and thought of as family, were plotting behind my back. They weren't. My husband gets a new job 6 hours away and we are going to move. I'm heading up a new software change and I agree to stay an extra month to help with the transition. The Sunday before he is supposed to move, I snap. I want to end my life. I called my boss from the ear and broke the news to her over the phone and told her I wouldn't be coming back after all. After 5 days in the mental ward, we move. My husband takes my keys back into my office for me. I was too ashamed to go inside. After a year away, I finally went into my old office and saw my old coworkers, at least the ones that hadn't quit due to poor upper management. We cried and hugged, and I felt better about it all, but I'm still ashamed of what I did. Story 30. At my office, about once a month or so, multiple people would come in wearing the same colored outfits. No coordination, no plan, just everyone showing up matching. One guy would make a huge deal out of it. "Oh, hey, it must be blue shirt Daisy, what you didn't get the memo, her." Then one day, a bunch of people had on teal, and he starts again. The person he picked on for not wearing the right color looked at him and commented that it was a beautiful color on him, but the buttons were backwards, and walked away. A hole locked himself in his office for the day. Complained to HR that someone had called him gay, then quit a week later saying he couldn't work with people who thought he was a gay. There was also a woman who threw a tantrum because often the toilet seats were left up in an office that was 90% male. She quit because all the other women started putting the seat up when we were done. Story 31. Where I used to work, a boss had an issue with one of the guys in the warehouse. It all seemed fine, but then in the course of less than a day, they found out he was stealing merchandise out of the warehouse. To ensure he wouldn't get caught, he would take it to another coworker's house. He was having an affair with that coworker. They'd had sex in the warehouse on multiple occasions. Literally, nobody had any idea any of this was happening. Then suddenly this whole story came out at once. Funnily enough, he got fired, but his accomplice kept her job. She somehow kept working there for another 6 months or so, even with everyone judging the hell out of her. Story 32. When I used to be a server at a decently upscale restaurant, I worked with this dishwasher, I'll call him Rick, who was in his late 40 AS, and had clearly had some issues with hard substances and alcohol in his past. The guy was just a little off. As a little backstory, a week before his meltdown, one of the female servers accidentally brushed against him in the kitchen, which really pissed him off for some reason. He complained to the GM that the server had grabbed him. I winked at him and said, "Do something about it." Definitely didn't happen. One day, about a week later, he shows up to work wasted and whacked out on pills, with blood all over his face and a busted nose. I can only assume he got his ass kicked at a bar before his shift started. He came in through the front door of the restaurant and was wandering around the dining room and ranting about how he was harassed by his coworkers and that the restaurant was a crap hole with crap managers. While the shift manager is running around apologizing and comping people's meals, the GM grabs Rick and herds him into the kitchen where he starts yelling at him and tells him to get the duck out of the restaurant. Rick predictably refuses to leave, so the GM literally wrestles him out the back door and shuts it. Rick starts trying to open it again, and like 3 people were holding the door shut. Then he stops trying to open the door, and we all realize he's going to run around to the front again. We beat him there and lock the door, but he's hammering on the glass and yelling, "I'm going to hit you all!" Police are called, and the GM goes outside to try and calm him down, but they end up sort of wrestling around again. To this day, seeing a fancy restaurant's general manager wrestle an insane dishwasher to the ground in front of a dozen customers is by far the most unprofessional thing I've ever witnessed. Rick ended up running away before the police got there, but he still called the restaurant and made vague threats for like a week after. I recently heard from an ex-coworker that Rick now sells vacuums door to door. Story 33. I used to work in a very cliquey lab, 8 women in the same room for 40 hours a week, with a boss who encouraged gossip. The ages ranged from late 50s to 2 months out of college 21. The 21-year-old had worked there while a student and promoted up to full-time, but never shed the student worker mentality. One of the middle-aged women got fed up with the immaturity and decided to lay down the law that, "We are co-workers, not friends. Stop interrogating me about my personal life." Young chick could not handle the idea that older coworker did not want to be friends. Just respectful colleagues, and had a sobbing meltdown. This whole drama fest was mediated by the boss, and it made for a super awkward time to come back from lunch. Story 34. Worked in a retail pharmacy with a guy who was truly a good dude, but a bit unstable. He was originally hired to work in the pharmacy, but couldn't handle the stress. Had a breakdown of sorts. Took some weeks off. Then ended up just running register in the front store when he came back. He had worked for this company for something like 8 years. He was a young guy, so this was his entire career history. So a few years go by, and upper management decides he's been doing well, and it's time for him to move back to the pharmacy again. I was his direct supervisor, and I tried to handle him in a very delicate and specific way. For the most part, things are going well. He's great with customers, and he's a generally positive guy. He did have some off days here and there, but who doesn't, once he actually fell asleep Indian style back in the medicine bay. This pharmacy is very busy. It's cold and flu season, and things are in full swing. This particular day, he's working the drive-thru, and a customer pulls up wanting to pick up her pain meds. We're pretty backed up that day, and they weren't ready yet. When he tells her that, she freaks out, yells at him, etc., which is honestly fairly common. He handles it incredibly well, remains cordial and professional, and I'm actually really proud of him. Just as I am about to recognize him for the exceptional way he handled that transaction, he cocks his fist back and unleashes this Hulk punch right into the register. The glass smashes everywhere, and he calmly turns to me and says, "Man, I'm so sorry, I don't know why I did that." We bandaged him up and he eventually went to the hospital. Company put him on leave for a week or so while trying to decide what to do with him. They called him back into the store to tell him he was fired, and he starts talking about how he was going to burn the place down with everyone inside it, so on and so forth. The store had an armed guard for a week after that. Story 35. Worked at a wholesale office supply company that had a warehouse op. A guy was hired to pick orders and showed up to start work. Some weirdness ensued, and about the 3 days day, someone else comes to report that new guy is hurting himself. He had dropped a box of razor blades, which burst open, and was picking them with his bare hands, hitting his fingers. Manager lets him go, says it isn't working out. New guy shows up next day for work with his lunch packed and ready to go. Manager sends him home. New guy's mom comes in to plead his case. Still fired. Many months forward, we hear on the news that new guy is arrested for standing in the door of his rather upscale home on Main St. Nude and calling out to the Catholic schoolgirls. While he is in the psych ward, our company gets a visit from the Secret Service asking about new guy. Turns out he had been threatening press, Ronald Reagan. I still feel sad when I think about how optimistic he must have felt when he showed up with his lunch, ready to have another chance. Story 36. I worked in a factory on third shift. There was a very douchey guy working one of the industrial ovens. He wore a bandana, had a soul patch, tribal tattoos, shirts with the sleeves ripped off, and owned nothing in the world except a very expensive motorcycle. So we hire this new girl, and apparently that crap was love potion to her. She was in love with this guy and ignored her work to get near him. She always wore crop tops with boob showing and short shorts. This is a factory, so that is a safety hazard, and she was reprimanded for it, but kept doing it for him. She would leave her job to talk to him and purposefully pick up scrap near him so she could bend over near his workstation all the time. Of course, after a while, she was asked not to come back. She starts crying and screams about how everyone there was mean and unfair to her because we were all jealous of how hot she was. She starts hurling scrap metal at the bosses and gets escorted out. She waits in the parking lot for the rest of the shift, 5 hours, to try to talk to. Throw herself at douchey guy. He's scared off by the crazy and doesn't want anything to do with it. She starts stalking him at work and at his favorite bar, so he ends up with a restraining order on her. Fun note, we were all making about $8 an hour. That's not enough money to put up with that kind of insane. Story 37. We were approaching a design review deadline, which means crunch time on top of crunch time. This one guy had been working on a component for 80 hours a week for 4 weeks straight. Come in at 6, leave at 8, continue working at home. For context, he is a stupidly friendly old man. He's always jolly and pleasant, incredibly warm person to be around. Anyways, there had been meetings before the final design review for various small things. And he was the only person to not be invited to those meetings because he wasn't working on any of those things. Turned out that they had made some changes that drastically affected his design. The day before design review, he finds out what's happened in a preview that was emailed out. He goes to the VP's office and screams at him. It's a mid-sized startup, so all the senior management come out too. He flips out on all of them and says, "Go duck yourselves, I'm going to see my grandson." On his way, he looked at me, gave the biggest grin, waved, and said, "Good night," and left for a week. He was too important and knowledgeable to fire. Came back and just continued working like nothing happened. Story 38. I was working as a lab assistant under a woman who was pregnant, and in the stage where her sense of smell was like a superpower. One of the tests I had to do involved using pure acetic acid, very strong vinegar. She really couldn't handle the smell so much that she made me and thousands of dollars of lab equipment go outside to run this test while sitting on the concrete step 15 meters or so from the lab. Story 39. Coworker fails to get job finished with allotted material in time. Coworker asks for assistance as material is running out. I start troubleshooting as it runs out, throw up my hands and say it's too late. Coworker cries, goes red-faced, throws tantrum, and reports me to supervisor for being insulting. Duck off. Ask for help sooner next time, or don't bother wasting my time. Story 40. It wasn't really a coworker, it was me. I used to work at a popular brunch restaurant as a cook in an upscale outdoor shopping mall. Our clientele was mostly upper-middle-class white women. Nothing against upper-middle-class white women, but y'all are particular as duck about your food. One particular Sunday morning, I was getting slammed as usual when a group of women sit at the bar. We had an open kitchen, and the end of the bar was the beginning of the kitchen, and they ordered their brunch with a million modifications, so I was already annoyed. I send the food out and watch them take pictures of their plates and selfies, and post them all to their different social media accounts. They do this for a good 15 minutes before they even take a bite of their meals. A few minutes later, my GM comes up to me with their plates and tells me that they are cold and they want me to recook their food. I lost my crap. I mixed all their food together, it was 3 eggs Benedicts, in a saute pan and blasted the heat, all while screaming at the top of my lungs, "Are these S so special that the laws of thermodynamics don't affect them?" What did they think was going to happen when they took pictures of their damn food for 20 minutes? I threw their food back on the plates that were sent back and put them in the window. My GM told me to get the duck off the line. I could see the women looking at me and I went out back to smoke. Surprisingly, I didn't get fired, and apparently the women ate their food really fast and tipped really well.